Hi, everybody. We wanted to connect with you today. Thanks for joining us. This is a continuation of the last few weeks, what we've been discussing, which is, of course, is competitive intelligence. And so we wanted to take a few minutes today to highlight a few examples of what is competitive intelligence, what do you actually mean by that, and what does that actually mean for my business? So without further ado, we will jump in. So competitive intelligence, we've gotten a lot of questions on what is that? What does that mean exactly? And so this is my best attempt at trying to distill this down. Competitive intelligence is really about taking information that you have, really understanding what it means, and then applying that to your business and informing your strategy as far as what you're going to do with that. And it's very much a continuous loop of learning, understanding, applying it. So competitive intelligence, you may have heard lots of different terms. Some of these were grabbed from more academic sources. Some of these were grabbed from kind of real life. The Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals has a forum, and I had asked on that forum what those professionals use as far as terminology. And so really, I wanted to bring this to you and help us to understand what exactly does this mean. And so I think for the purpose of our discussion today, we're really going to focus on business insights, because that's ultimately what this is. It's really about understanding, again, what information do you have, generating those insights, and then helping you make decisions based on those insights. So with business insights slash competitive intelligence, we've kind of got three components here. As you can see on the map, or on the slide rather, this is you. And this is business insights slash competitive intelligence. So this is really your roadmap. This is really you understanding and making sense of that information to help you in your operating environment. So whether you're a retail shop or whether you're a manufacturer, whatever, at the end of the day, it's all about taking you, understanding the business insights and competitive intelligence that you have, and then applying that to your operating environment. So what are the types of information that can guide your strategy? What can help you create a successful roadmap? When I had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Jonathan Kaloff, who will be facilitating our first seminar on competitive intelligence, he brought forth a model which I thought was great, and I'm going to highlight that today. Basically, competitive intelligence or business insights, that's broken down into three core parts as far as the types of information that we can put together. So the first is primary research. That's using interviews and questioning to understand different informational bits that can help guide you. The second, we probably all know this really well, Googling or secondary research. So it's going out to information that is available to you and bringing that in and looking at it. And finally, big data slash small data. And what that is, basically, in a nutshell, is it's information that only you have about your business. If your competitors have this, you might be in trouble. Those are the three components of what competitive intelligence is. And really, at the end of the day, when we look at this, it's about the information, which we looked at just now, the three types of information. It's about context, so that's looking at it through the lens of your business to understand it. And then that helps us generate strategy. And that informational piece, as I was saying earlier and alluded to, it's really, what do I know? So what do I know about my business? And for those spots where you don't know the answers to questions you feel you need answered, it's going out and getting that information. So let's look at some real world examples here. First, we have Betty's Fashion Boutique. So Betty was lamenting, my sales have gone down this year. I'm really not sure what's happening. So in order to figure out what's going on, Betty really needs some good data so she can make good decisions. So Betty had an idea, and it worked out pretty well for her. She went out and did some primary research. So again, that's talking to people and understanding what you need to know. And doing that, she actually conducted a customer survey, and she got some great feedback. Said, your prices are too high. Gordon's down the road has the same clothes at better prices. Your customer service sucks. Those were great pieces of feedback that she got. Then she went and did some Googling. She did some secondary research. She found that her competitors, some of them had an e-commerce platform. Betty didn't. Gordon's, who we mentioned earlier, had joined a buying group, so a clothing buying group, so they could get discounts, and they got a better price. She found out about that when Gordon tweeted about that on Twitter. And finally, she found stats showing that Amazon clothing purchases were growing year over year by 10%. And then she went out and validated this information. She made sure that it wasn't just a one-off. Finally, she looked at big data. So she looked at some internal data, noticed that every year for the last 10 years, she had normally done a sale. She had done discounts for her customers in April, but she had stopped doing that because her margins were really decreasing. But then she noticed that sales were down 20% compared to the 5-year average. Secondly, repeat business for customers from 55 to 65 had gone down 40% in the last 3 years, and new business for customers between 18 and 30 had gone up 5% each year for the last 5 years. Interesting. So we talked about we have information, and then we have to look through the lens of our business and understand that in context and then inform our strategy. So for Betty, this raises some interesting questions, all of what we just discussed. So should she consider the competition? And how does she protect herself or insulate herself from competitor risk? We've got Gordon's, which is local. We've got Amazon, which is obviously huge. Those other retailers that are doing e-commerce. What does she do about those? Should she look at her pricing? The customer had said, well, your pricing sucks. She was more expensive than Gordon's for the same price. Is that a problem? Does she need to look at customer service? She was told her customer service sucked. Was that just a one-off, somebody maybe having a bad day? And finally, should she understand her changing demographics? So if she's losing her older patrons, but her younger base is growing, what does that mean, and how does she need to adapt her business to help her grow? So again, with Betty, what we want to remember is we have those 3 layers of information. We just went through a little bit of the context, and of course for Betty, then she'd have to inform and build out a strategy to respond to the things that matter. Now obviously, these are just some different examples of what could be. This is not exhaustive by any means, but you can sort of see the types of things that one would need to consider as far as how you would approach this through a business insights or competitive intelligence lens. Let's roll on to a second example. So Elise's seafood processing and exports. Elise says, I'm looking to new markets. She's going to China and Taiwan abroad for increased sales opportunities, and she needs distribution channels in those markets. Elise went out and did some primary research as well. Now, just because you have primary research, which is talking to somebody, that doesn't mean that you always have to do it. So in Elise's case, she actually engaged some local market research firms, both in China and Taiwan, to interview prospective customers. She wanted to understand what are the types of seafoods in these regions, what pricing structures work, what can the market bear as far as price, what are the expected times for delivery, what are the quality expectations, and finally, who currently supplies these customers with their seafood. As far as secondary research, Elise looked at the following global trade reports through the Trade Commissioner Service that looked at both of those markets. Based on information from the primary research, she also did a deep dive into her Canadian competitors to understand her competition. So she'd jump into their financials, their executive team, their hires, their fires, how have they done, what are their product specialties, and so on. She researched potential distribution channels for her product in these countries. She examined rules and regulations for exporting to these countries, which of course is very important. And finally, she looked at the past and current and future macro trends, both political and economic, that could change the market. Some examples being if there are more sort of nationalist type policies or a growing middle class. What does that mean for her business? Lastly, with information, so she looked at her production capabilities. So if a customer needs 20% more production, can she do it? What about 50%? All really good considerations. What cash flow is required to finance an expansion to these markets? Again, very important question. And finally, what current percentage of her website traffic is from these markets? So who is she already engaging? And are they converting in any way on her website? So that might be them filling out a contact form, or perhaps a get a quote now, or downloading some marketing collateral, whatever that may be. So Elise, for her context and strategy, what should she do? Well, based on the data, does she go to China, Taiwan, both? Neither. Obviously, whatever she digs up and builds out sort of a comprehensive piece as far as guidance on, is this a good opportunity? How much do we go in? Maybe do we just do a small scale pilot to test the market and then do a larger scale rollout? That depends what Elise wants to do. But again, it's taking that information, looking at it in context, and then informing your strategy. Does she have adequate production capability? If needed, can she buy product from other manufacturers and still maintain adequate margin if she can't keep up with the production demands? Does she have the right shipping and distribution strategy in place? How can she serve customers in a way that meets their cultural needs for sales and marketing as well? Because of course, dealing in a different culture, that's very important to consider that aspect for your strategy. And finally, does she have enough capital available to cash flow operations? Obviously, when you're looking at a potential export market and a business that's very capital intensive, that changes things from when you're just used to doing domestic operations. So all good considerations. Let's switch gears a little bit. We're going to jump into Bob's metal manufacturing. So Bob said, I used to do really well in oil and gas and mining, but the customers used to come to me but don't anymore, and I want to increase my Canadian and US sales again. All good goals. So Bob took a little bit of a different approach. Bob actually began calling old customers as well as new prospects. And really he dug into understanding more about their business. So he said, tell me about your business today. What are the trends that are happening in your space? Where do you see your business going over the next while? And then, being a good salesman as he is, of course, at the end he said, what can I do to win your business? So he had one example where he had a business that used to do $3 million a year with him. So he said, hey, we used to do $3 million a year with you. We did 20,000 last year. Where can we improve? What are we doing wrong? And really understanding that. And then secondly, Bob began visiting his competition. Now, depending on the market that you're dealing with, some may not be as friendly to this sort of thing. But at least here in Atlantic Canada, he was able to visit his competition. And so Bob said, can you tell me how you're doing over the last 3 years? So was it just his business that was suffering? That's what he's really trying to establish. What changes have you made in your business that have been beneficial in that time? So even if factors are contributing that are making business really tough, are there firms that have managed to grow beyond that and do really well in spite of the market conditions? And finally, Bob, as he was going, he took an inventory of the number of staff, the types and quantity of machinery, and other points of interest on his tour. When you're going through this, you need to understand this is really a benchmarking exercise. It's understanding, because you know your business and what you do, but how do these other folks compare, and are they being successful or not as successful as you? With respect to secondary research, Bob jumped into what are the trends happening in oil and gas and mining, what's happening in politics, the economy, and technology that are changing things. With respect to his competitors, are they better than him? Going back to sort of some of the primary research, Or is everybody suffering right now? If they're better, is it because of their technology, because they have better people, maybe some sort of other reason? Finally, with all the mergers and acquisitions in the space, so of course oil and gas has changed a lot in the last 3-4 years. Who are the new potential customers that he could go to? And as part of that, you can use competitive intelligence and business insights through secondary research and to find out who are those key staff, how can he connect with them, whether to LinkedIn, maybe a LinkedIn group where he's been a long-standing member where he contributes and really shares his expertise. Maybe there's some new folks in there that he can target. And finally, with the changes in products, how can he stay ahead of the curve? So with technology really becoming very important in oil and gas, as an example, where is that market going the next 5, 10, 15 years, and how can he stay ahead of that? And then finally with big data, so Bob began to look at what are my inputs for cost of goods sold? Can I optimize or improve this? Looking at raw materials and labor. Secondly, he looked at what's my customer acquisition costs, factoring in both marketing and sales, and how does that compare to industry benchmarks? It's fine sometimes when you just do business as usual. You might be used to spending, say, $3 million a year on sales and marketing activities, and it's been that way for 30 years. It's always good to ask why, and maybe you need to be spending $12 million a year. Could you get a better return from that? So it's just understanding again, and the question here, how does that compare to industry benchmarks? Maybe you're better, maybe you're worse, but you need to understand where you are. And finally, where are sales trending? So if nothing else changes, how much longer can I afford to continue on operations as they are, which of course is very important from a cash flow and financial planning standpoint. So context and strategy, briefly again with Bob, what should he do? So how does he respond to his competitors that are better? Does he invest in technology? Does he double down on certain customers or products? Does he have a customer service problem? If so, what does he do with that? Can he rebuild existing customer relationships? Can he leverage these and build out new opportunities? Would something like a lobbying effort be beneficial based on the political and economic climate? And finally, what are the sales and marketing opportunities to acquire new customers? So what's his current customer acquisition costs and lifetime value of those customers? Can he decrease those costs in some way? And can he increase his customer lifetime value? I want to wrap up with this example. So new app protection. John is the CEO of this company. We're a growing cybersecurity app that trains employees to be vigilant against phishing attacks. We really want to accelerate rather, our growth. So with respect to information, John went out and he did some primary research. And this is sort of a different example again, but you can see all of these techniques and the strategy and the way that you approach this is very similar. You just have to apply it to your industry. So even before developing his product, John had gone out to talk to customers to understand what their needs were and are. Once he created his minimum viable product, so it's sort of his initial working prototype, he went back to those customers to get their feedback. And furthermore, he called on his industry contacts to get their feedback on current solutions that were available in the market. So even before he's put a lot of money in this, he's really doing a nice job of understanding what's the market, where do I fit, where do I play, who are my core competitors, just by talking to people in his industry. And in this context, we're looking at what's good about them, what's bad about them, how's their pricing, and how's their customer experience. Because again, thinking through this to help inform your strategy, if you can really differentiate yourself in a context of whether it's you have amazing customer experience or your pricing is might be the middle, but your solution is by far the best, it's about figuring out what that competitive advantage is. John then did some secondary research, so he really looked deeply into his competitors and their products to understand what his competitive advantage was. as well as his competitor strategy. And so just a couple things that can help him understand how to do that. He followed them on social media. He signed up for their email newsletters, watched their website for changes. These are all sort of very small tactics that you can use, but over time, as you start to accumulate data, it can actually be part of really helping inform your strategy on what you're, or help inform your understanding, rather, of your competitor strategy. John used the Atlantic Canadian Market Intelligence Program powered by Mars. I would be remiss if I did not mention this. This is a service, of course, that we offer, and if you'd like to hear more about it, please get in touch. To get more information on overall market trends, as well as the investors that are investing in companies like his, he also sought out to understand how the needs for products like his are evolving. Is the need growing, or is it going away? And finally, John used LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook extensively to really gather information on potential prospects and listen to what they were saying and participate in social conversations to help inform his product development. And lastly, with big data, John dove heavily into stats to help him understand what the best and worst parts were of his app. So he looked at the user interface to understand how he could better arrange resources. He also looked at the user interface analytics to ensure his conversions, whatever those would be, as well as his app goals were really working. He assessed his app using App Store optimization techniques and compared that with benchmarks of competitors. And finally, John re-evaluated his pricing model after factoring in customer acquisition costs, customer care, marketing, and future development costs. So finally, and to wrap this up, what should John do? So how does he respond to his competitors with respect to marketing and sales, as well as pricing? Can he leverage his industry contacts? If so, could he use this to get speaking engagements or somehow otherwise position himself as a thought leader? And finally, what investors should John contact to accelerate his growth? A key consideration here would be, is his business stable enough? Is it proven enough to be investable, or is he too early? So those are just a few things that John could consider. These are just 4 different examples of how companies across different industries can use competitive intelligence. I hope you really got a great taste and a great flavor for what that could look like. And to wrap up, I'd just like to mention that we've got some amazing training coming up in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, PEI and Newfoundland. And this program really is all about day one, helping you to understand how competitive intelligence can be used in your business after the initial delivery date. There's mentorship as you develop out your competitive intelligence plans for your company. And then finally, we're doing a half-day wrap-up where it'll be a little bit of a capstone. So we're really excited about this as a lead-in opportunity. We want to help growth stage companies across Atlantic Canada to grow and to scale. And we also want to give a thanks to the support from ACOA and to our partners as well. So thank you very much for tuning in today. I hope it's been valuable, and we will talk to you soon. If you have any questions, please let us know in the comments below.